What if the next global crisis doesn't begin in a battlefield, but in your grocery cart? Every time you shop for food, you're seeing a warning signal. Your grocery receipt is no longer just a bill, it's a tracker of a system under pressure. For decades, we've lived inside a modern miracle, an anomaly in human history. We walk into brightly lit, climate-controlled supermarkets completely surrounded by infinite, unseasonal, cheap food. You can buy avocados from Mexico in the dead of a Canadian winter, or meat from Australia shipped perfectly fresh to a grocery store in Tokyo. It trained us to believe that this level of abundance is normal, that the shelves will always be full, and the prices will always make sense. They won't, because the era of endless, affordable food is ending. Global food prices hit their highest levels in years after 2020. In some countries, basic staples like eggs, rice, and bread doubled in price in a matter of months. And while the news cycle has moved on, the underlying fractures in the system have not been repaired. This isn't normal inflation, it is a structural shift. When you see a price tag spike at the store, it is incredibly easy to point fingers, to blame greedy corporations, a single bad harvest, or a temporary supply chain glitch. But the truth is much darker and much harder to fix. No single government caused this, and that is exactly what makes it so dangerous. To understand why the supermarket is breaking, you have to realize a hidden truth about the modern world. We don't actually eat food anymore. We eat oil, logistics, and chemistry. Let's look at a simple, everyday item, a loaf of bread. When you buy that bread, you aren't just paying for wheat. You are paying for a massive, invisible, and highly leveraged geopolitical machine. First, you are paying for the diesel fuel inside the massive industrial tractors that prepared the soil and harvested the crop. You are paying for the electricity that powered the grain elevators. You are paying for the bunker fuel inside the massive cargo ships that transported it across oceans. But most importantly, you are paying for the invisible chemistry that allowed that wheat to grow in the first place. A century ago, scientists discovered how to turn air and energy into fertilizer. That breakthrough helped humanity grow from 2 billion to over 8 billion people. But there's a catch, a massive, terrifying catch. You cannot make this fertilizer out of nothing. It requires an immense amount of energy, specifically natural gas. Natural gas is used to create ammonia, and ammonia is the foundational building block of modern fertilizer. This is the chemistry choke point. If the price of natural gas spikes, the price of fertilizer spikes. If fertilizer becomes too expensive, farmers buy less of it. If they use less fertilizer, crop yields plummet. Suddenly, there is less food in the world. If fertilizer vanished tomorrow, half the planet's food output could collapse. Our entire food supply is completely tethered to global energy markets. But energy is only the first piece of the puzzle, because once the food is grown, it has to move. Our food system is tied to energy, but it is also tied to ships, ports, trade routes, and currencies. We live on a planet connected by massive maritime highways. Tens of thousands of huge cargo ships are constantly moving millions of tons of grain, cooking oil, and meat across the oceans. But these ships have to pass through incredibly narrow, vulnerable choke points: the Panama Canal, the Suez Canal, the Strait of Hormuz. When a drought hits the Panama Canal, ships can't pass. When geopolitical conflict erupts in the Red Sea, ships are forced to detour thousands of miles around the continent of Africa. When shipping slows, costs explode. Every extra day a cargo ship spends at sea burns tens of thousands of dollars in fuel. Who pays for that? You do. The cost is quietly passed down, fraction by fraction, until it lands directly on your grocery receipt. And this is where most people realize this was never just about food, because there's an even more invisible force driving up your grocery bill: the United States dollar. Global commodities like oil, wheat, and soybeans are overwhelmingly traded in US dollars. This creates a massive vulnerability for the rest of the world. Imagine you're a baker in a developing nation. You import your wheat. Over the last year, the farmer who grew the wheat hasn't raised his price at all. The shipping company hasn't raised their price either, but the value of your local currency has dropped while the US dollar has surged in strength. Suddenly, because of a currency fluctuation on a screen in Wall Street, your cost to buy that exact same wheat just doubled. When the US dollar rises, poorer nations pay more for the same wheat. And this is where the global dominoes begin to fall. Because when the system fractures, poor countries crack first. In wealthy nations, a family might spend 10 to 15% of their budget on food. If prices double, it's painful. People complain, they cut back on vacations, they buy cheaper brands. But in developing nations, a family might spend 40 to 50% of their entire income just to eat. If food prices double there, people don't just complain, they starve. And when people can't feed their children, governments fall. History proves this over and over again. Rising bread prices were one of the pressures that helped ignite the Arab Spring. When the cost of basic survival becomes unattainable, the social contract breaks. But this crisis does not stay contained to developing nations. The contagion always spreads upward. Right now, a creeping, silent anxiety is washing over the middle class in the West. You can see it in the data, and you can feel it in the aisles. For many families, a crisis doesn't look like a sudden, dramatic famine. It looks like smaller portions. It looks like substituting meat for cheaper carbohydrates. It looks like skipping meals, worsening nutrition, and permanent, exhausting financial stress. It is the slow, agonizing erosion of purchasing power, forcing families to quietly downgrade their standard of living week by week. And as this pressure builds, nations begin to panic. When a country fears it won't have enough food for its own people, it does what humans have always done. It hoards. Over the last few years, we've seen major economies slam the doors shut on their trading partners. We've seen India ban the export of certain types of rice. We've seen Indonesia temporarily halt the export of palm oil. We've seen nations quietly stockpiling millions of tons of grain in strategic reserves. For one country, it makes sense. Protect your own people first. But globally, it becomes a chain reaction. When one major producer stops exporting, the global supply shrinks. When the supply shrinks, the price for everyone else spikes even higher, which causes the next country to panic and ban their own exports. We're entering a new era of geopolitical leverage. Food security has become the ultimate national security. The countries that control the fertilizer, the energy, and the grain now hold massive, unchecked power over the global south. Food is no longer just sustenance. It is a weapon. It is a geopolitical tool used to force compliance, secure alliances, and punish enemies in a rapidly fragmenting world. The battle lines of the 21st century won't just be drawn over microchips or oil fields. They'll be drawn over calories. This means the nature of a global crisis is fundamentally changing. The next shortages you experience may not look like empty shelves. They may be full shelves that very few can afford. Which brings us to the ultimate, haunting paradox of our time. Right now, as you watch this, the world is producing more raw calories than at any point in human history. Our agricultural science is better than ever. Our tractors are guided by GPS. Our seeds are genetically optimized to resist drought and pests. We aren't running out of food. We're running out of cheap, stable food. The entire web of cheap energy, cheap shipping, and stable currencies that kept food affordable is unraveling, and the world is entirely unprepared for the difference. Because if food becomes political, every election, every protest, and every border crisis changes with it. To understand the hidden systems shaping our future, subscribe to FactoraFlow. But remember this, the fragile system that keeps us fed runs on energy, logistics, and chemistry. And if food depends on water, the next global crisis may already be drying up beneath us.